Okay. And I wanted to do just a short follow-up video about the reading. I barely mentioned it, so I just wanted to give you kind of like some of my thoughts and my notes on the reading. Um, I guess to start, how I would say what my feelings were about it. I thought it was really interesting. I felt like when I was reading it, I was thinking of, I had like the Chronicles of Narnia, like those talking animals in my head. So that kind of made me giggle a little bit. There were a couple things that I actually thought were really great arguments. It did feel like a little like mystical. Obviously, it's not meant to be taken like literally, but I did think it was kind of funny sometimes, like the banter between the animals and the humans, and how the king was kind of like moderating or mediating those conversations a little bit. I think I've always thought about this. I'm like, I wonder if plants and animals could like vocalize to us. I feel like they can talk, obviously. I feel like my plants actually talk to each other. It's really weird. They kind of like they'll grow towards each other, and it's so interesting. But I always thought that like if plants and animals could vocalize to humans what they really thought about us, it probably wouldn't be very good. So I feel like this article is actually it's not an article, this reading this week was kind of like nature's way of kind of kicking us in the ass a little bit and just saying like you guys are really screwed up and you guys do a lot of stupid shit. So anyway, couple things I wanted to add in there, and then I'll talk about two major arguments that were in there that I felt I agreed with the most, or I thought were most interesting. Um, this idea that the humans kept saying over and over and over again, and I did notice it was said like 75 times if they said it once, that we are their masters and they are our slaves. And it's interesting because the animals, like one of their first rebuttals to that was that, but we were created on this earth by God as well. And it is your responsibility to treat us kindly, not to misuse and mistreat us, because we're created by God as living beings on this earth as well. And we weren't really bred for your destruction or for you to take ownership and make us your slaves. That's definitely a very oppressed way um to feel. But also it's kind of like a stupid argument on humans parts, like, well, we were created to take ownership of the world, but it's like, but in a lot of ways they were here before us. And even if that's not something that as like a religious person you believe, the reality is they're also living things on this planet as well, and they do deserve to not be harmed or for us to be destructive and mistreat them on purpose just for the sake of saying, haha, we're the winner, we're the best. It just seems to be a common trend in what we do as human beings. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. I also, there was a point made in here about how the animals, especially like the cattle and the cows and things like that, how they fled to the deserts, wastes, or mountaintops, but the Amalekites continue to pursue us. And this kind of like made me sad a little bit because I feel like a lot of animals like scatter kind of away from human beings. But if you think of when humans first occupied the planet, and obviously that's up for debate as to how that came about and when it came about and all these things, but just from this narrative's point of view, humans kind of becoming present on the earth, and you know how we kind of went into something that was theirs and kind of occupied that and forced them out, and then on top of that we still went out to try to find them after they kind of scattered and spread out. It was kind of like a really disheartening thing. This kind of reminded me a little bit of what we did with Indigenous people and with Native Americans. So to me, I kind of saw like a common thread in that. My voice is going, sorry. Um, there was one really good point, and this is the first argument. I'm going to do two of them. There's a lot, but I wanted to do my two biggest ones. Was this argument of fairest height. And this to me was like really, really interesting. Whether you believe in evolution or not, or I should say, whether someone believes in evolution or not, the way that human beings are composed and created, and even the way they mentioned, like the way that we stand, and how I think the text referred to it as like humans were created erect, so like to stand up straight, whereas animals, and we were given height, right? Like this idea of like erect full height to where we could reach high bearing fruits, things that other animals could not. There's obviously a sense of privilege that comes with that. And they mentioned that God made you standing upright and erect, and he gave you food, fruit and seeds to eat, whereas he gave us the grass and things that are lowest bearing fruit on the ground that we have access to. So the idea of fairest height, why do you have to come down to our level? This is kind of how I perceived it. Like, why do we have to go down to their level? Do we not have enough up here? Have we not been given, because according to them, they're like, well, if you're going to make a biblical argument or a religious argument, that the gods, gave us to you for you to come and enslave us. They said, but God didn't really create you that way. God created you to be tall and upright. You have a natural benefit, a physical benefit and privilege that we don't have. Why is that not enough for you? To me, that's just like a human behavior that I think should really be questioned throughout a lot of this, and not just with animal rights, but also just the way that we treat oppressed groups in general. And it's just, we've got to have more, and it means that someone else has to have less. And the oppressed group is obviously the group that has less. But so the idea of fairest height and that argument, I just thought was really, really interesting. It's something I don't think I've ever really heard of. And from an evolutionary perspective, or just from the way that humans were created and the way animals were created, are very different. And I believe that those do have different purposes. So kind of seeing that and kind of unpeeling that layer was something that was really, really intriguing to me. So that was the first argument I wanted to dive into. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was this idea of more intelligence. And I think that this for me was like a really big theme, like consistent theme throughout. And it's like, but we're smarter than you, we're bigger than you, we're stronger than you. God gave you to us. And that we're to take ownership of you, and you're to go and to work and to feed us and to labor for us and provide for us because you're our slave. And the animals' rebuttal to that was, and I really love this, they were like, well, if you're that smart and you want to use God as an argument, would you not boast over God's creations as your own? If you were that smart and you wanted to use God as the argument, why are you boasting as if it's your own doing, your own credibility? And it kind of, I want to say sanctifies, but like kind of magnifies you and your works and your purpose on the earth. Why are you using something that God created, not just for your benefit, but in a way you're taking credit for that and being able to use that credit for however you see fit because you feel that you're justified in doing so? To me, I thought that that was such an interesting, I don't want to say funny because I'm not like making light of it, but to me, it was just such a mystical, kind of intriguing way to think about intelligence and how we rate intelligence. And obviously, that's a whole other philosophical rabbit hole, but it just goes to show that like the way that we quantify intelligence based on different species, like how do you just say that human intelligence is the best intelligence? Because we couldn't survive in a plant's world. You know what I'm saying? We couldn't survive in a volcano's world as human beings. So if our intelligence is superior, then hypothetically that argument would mean that we could go and take that and apply it to any part of the earth, and we'd be able to, dominate that or rule that and take ownership of it because it was ours. It was given to us, and we have ownership of that. So I just thought it was really interesting. It's like, if you're going to use God as the argument, well, God created us as well to occupy the earth even before you were here. And you're taking God's creation and boasting as if it's something that's your own doing. And so I think as far as animal rights goes and plants as well, we did talk a little bit about plants. Um, I just think that I keep using the example of a honeybee and an earthworm as well. I didn't really touch on the earthworm too much, but to me, all of those things kind of go with gardening and plants. And to me, that's always been something for some reason that's very, very special to me. It's something I did when I was younger with my grandma. We used to make compost, and she since passed away. But for a long time, I disconnected from gardening and from plants because it was difficult for me. But there's something to me, I always say, I'm like, if you like, I have a relationship with my dogs. I know that sounds really like I think most people do. So it probably sounds pretty basic, but when I see a certain look in my dog's eyes when I leave, like I'll go visit in Michigan, and then when me and Tommy leave, my dog knows when I'm leaving. She sees my suitcase, and her name's Gigi. Gigi is wicked smart. Like, she is probably one of the smartest little dogs I've ever seen. She has such a personality. She's such a tomboy. It's so funny. But my mom tries to put these little bows on her head. And I guess like my intelligence argument, I kind of like wanted to talk about her to like wrap it up, because I feel that when I leave, I feel it, and I know she feels it too. And I look at her, and she gets a look in her eyes. It kind of makes me emotional. Like, she gets a look in her eyes. She'll sit by the door, and she kind of starts to whimper a little bit. And my mom tells me every time I leave, she'll sit there for like hours, and she'll just wait and look around, and she'll look to see where I'm at, and that she actually is depressed and sad. So to say that humans are more superior, because of intelligence or because of emotion or because of their contribution, all of that is just so relative. And to quantify that really is just impossible, because you can't compare my dog and what my dog goes through. Like, pain is pain, whether it's just because it's a different type of pain and it's quantified differently doesn't mean that it's not pain. And so my dog experiencing that and having an emotional reaction, and it now affects her mood, it affects her behaviors. Like, to me, that is rational and conscious. And so, yeah, she might not be a human being, but she's a living being, and she contributes a lot to my life. So that's kind of what that made me think of. So um, fairest height, more intelligence, going and taking dominion or possession over the earth to enslave things. It really bothers me. I see a lot of famous pastors go out and hunt endangered species, and it just drives me crazy. And they try to use that Bible verse as an excuse for why they can go and torture and kill other animals, and I just think it's absolutely terrible. So those were kind of my takeaways from the reading. Again, it was a little like kind of lighthearted and like mystical to me. I thought of like Narnia a lot, like the talking lion and stuff. So overall, I think people are definitely pushing for a lot more animal rights and things like that. But I think as far as just saying ontologically, rights aside, I think it's really insane for someone to say that that animals aren't deserving of bare minimum of fair treatment as humans. So just some interesting thoughts that I had. So I hope you have a great week. I'm really excited to talk about plants next week. That's probably, I got like a whole thing planned, so I'm excited to share it with you. But hope you have a good week. It's pretty cloudy today. Not happy about it, but I'm gonna go for a walk and have some lunch. So have a good week.